Earlier I talked about Ansible variables in the context of inventory. So we created an Ansible inventory file. It had information like this. Here we have a local group, we have a Cisco group, we have an Arista group, we have various variables associated with these individual entries and with the groups. Now, you can start to think of how unwieldy this single Ansible host file would get if we started adding lots and lots of variables into this file and started to try to manage everything inside there. So, what are some ways inside Ansible that we can still manage these complex variables but not have everything stored inside this single inventory file? So one way we can do that is something called group vars. So we can make a directory called group vars. Now notice the group vars directory needs to be relative to the location of the Ansible hosts file. There are some exceptions and caveats to this, i.e. there's other places we can store group vars, but that's where we're going to store it in this context that I'm talking about here. So my Ansible host file is located in my home directory. I'm making the group vars subfolder relative to that as well. So I cd into group vars, and then I'm going to start making YAML files that have the same name as my group. So I'm going to make a Cisco.yaml file, and I'm going to add some variables inside here. Now notice in the Ansible hosts inventory file, that actually wasn't YAML. That was sort of an INI style format. Now here I'm going to directly have YAML. So I have NTP server 1, and I'm going to have a variable NTP server 2. I'm going to have those two variables. Now let's go back to my playbook, and let's just print out NTP1 and print out NTP2. Now I need to change my host to be Cisco. And let's go ahead and execute that playbook. And here I see I print out those two variables. Now I could go back into group vars and I could make an arista.yaml. Let me actually copy the cisco.yaml, make a file called arista.yaml. Remember, it's the file name is the name of the group and then .yaml. And then let's change these to be 1.1.77, 1.1.33. Go back into my playbook. I'm going to execute this on both the Cisco and the Arista group. Now I'll go execute my playbook, and there we see the different NTP servers. So the ones that it's pulling from the cisco.yaml file and the ones that it's pulling from the arista.yaml file. Now, in addition to group vars, we can also have something known as host vars. So I can make a host vars directory, once again relative to the same directory that my Ansible host file is stored in. I cd into host vars, and now I'm actually going to make a subdirectory inside there that matches my individual names that I have in my Ansible host file. So if I look back at Ansible hosts, you'll see I have a name for PyNet router 1, and I have a name for PyNet router 2. So I'm making subfolders corresponding to these, and we'll give it some variable name. Now say that I gave this a variable of AS number 10, and then in PyNet router 2, and the variable name I choose here, you can choose whatever you want for a variable name here. and I'll make this be AS number 20. Now if I go back into my script, and let's just print out the AS number. We didn't make any variables AS number for Arista, so I'll only execute this for Cisco. Forgot to add a space there for my -v. And there we see our two AS numbers. So we have both group variables that apply to all members of the group. We also have host variables that apply only to those specific hosts. We're writing these files in YAML. In the case of group vars, we give the file name to be exactly the group name .yaml. In the case of host vars, we choose a file name, and then they add the .yaml extension to it. Now, this is expanding upon our inventory system. So these are all inventory variables, i.e. they bind directly to either the host or the group that we see in inventory. Now, we're going to expand upon this coming up in the next video, and I'm going to talk about other ways that you can get variables into your playbook. So there's a whole system of ways, and we'll start expanding upon that and talk about some additional ways you can get variables into your playbook.